Attorney Paolo Tamase, assistant professor at the UP Diliman College of Law, said the Office of the Ombudsman and the Justice Department must carefully map out their next steps in pursuing a civil forfeiture case against the estate of former DPWH Undersecretary Catalina Cabral. In an interview, Tamase said that while criminal cases typically result in imprisonment or fines, they also carry civil liabilities such as the payment of damages or the forfeiture of unlawfully acquired assets. He noted that cases filed before the Sandigan Bayan usually involve both criminal and civil aspects, which can become legally complex when the accused has already died. With Cabral's passing, a criminal case can no longer move forward, requiring any civil claims to be pursued separately. And joining us now, we have Attorney Paolo Tamase, Assistant Professor at UP Diliman College of Law. Magandang umaga po. Welcome back to Morning Matters.
Good morning, Gretchen, and to your viewers.
Okay, una-una, there are many speculations over what happened to Usec Cabral. As a lawyer, what aspects in her death were questionable to you?
Well, I've just read reports on the death of Usec Cabral, and I think I really haven't formed an opinion yet on whether there's foul play involved or whether it was self-harm, as some have suggested. The point in the final analysis is that this kind of complicates the litigation surrounding the forfeiture of her any illegally acquired wealth on her part, and of course the cases that will be filed against other DPWH officials.
Okay, of course, there are several angles to this, the way she died, as you mentioned, the handling of the police, the pronouncements of the DILG. But looking at how this was dealt with, kung maalala ko tinanggal yung mga police ng Tuba Benguet, kasi hindi nila tinuring na crime scene. Yun nangyari, kaya na-i-hand over yung personal effects ni Cabral sa pamilya. Should it be considered a crime scene? Paano yung decision-making doon? I mean, what are the elements that immediately say na put it in that category?
Well, under Philippine law, we really don't have good regulations concerning what we would call suspicious deaths in other. That's a problem. So, in other jurisdictions in the US, for example, if there's a death that is suspicious because of the age of who is involved or the circumstances of the person who died, there is automatically, a crime scene, or the police automatically treat it as a crime scene by law. And advocates from both the medical and the legal side have been pushing for that for a few decades already. So there needs to be some legal reform there. But as to current regulations, wala din kasi talaga. We really don't have any guidelines on whether something is to be treated as a crime scene or not. A lot of it rests on the discretion of the police.
Secretary John Victormulla has apparently almost ruled out foul play, saying her injuries were consistent with a fall. Do you think that's enough to rule out foul play? Or is this a little bit premature?
I honestly think it's a bit premature. The circumstances of any death like this, given how there was a remote location, this was far from the usual residence, there was nothing to indicate that Usec Cabral was sick, etc. They should call for a little more in introspection and circumspection and a proper investigation. So, but without a law that actually requires that from police authorities, a lot of it is passed on to the discretion of our justice and law enforcement officials.
And of course, the public is relying on just statements coming out of what happened over in Benguet. Sabi ng DILG, nakita na nila yung autopsy, confirming that this was Usec Catalina Cabral. But how could the public verify? What can the public do to get to the truth? Posible bang ma-release yun? O talagang violation yan ng data privacy pag hindi pinayagan ng pamilya? Knowing that this is a public case of public interest.
Well, with all due, no, with due regard and respect for, of course, the grief of the family, I think despite it being a death and a tragic death at that, the public does have the right to know the information on Usec Cabral's death. She would have been a critical witness or a critical cog in the investigation concerning the flood control issue. And therefore, her death and the circumstances of her death really become of public interest, which the people constitutionally have a right to. So they can, of course, or the proper civil society group can make the proper request with the DILG to release those autopsy findings or the findings of the police. But ultimately, if the DILG refuses or the family refuses, then it will have to go to court. The proper party will file a petition for mandamus, and the proper party can be any citizen in that case. So you can imagine again how long that will take. But it's important, right? I think
To verify the
because
identity
of
at least.
the identity and the circumstances, right? I mean, the immediate reaction from people after it happened was, is there going to be a hunt, no, or sunod-sunod ba yung mawawala? And I think while thankfully that hasn't happened, and according to the DILG, there was no foul play involved. The people do have a right to know, because of how important Yusef Cabral was and how important the flood control issue is.
And let's go to what you said about her death complicating any seizure of her assets. Paano, what does that change here in this whole equation? Ano yung pwedeng habulin ng taong bayan sa ngayon? Una-una, sa ari-arian. Pangalawa, sa impormasyon.
So let's go to the assets first. No? If Yusef Cabral did acquire illegally, no, wealth because of her involvement in the flood control issue, then the people do have a right to that to the properties that were acquired because of it, or to the equivalent amount of it. Now, normally, yung properties na yon, pwede yun kunin dapat doon sa criminal case na iyahain laban kay Yusef Cabral. But dahil namatay na siya, hindi na pwede mahain yung criminal case na yon. But hindi din malinaw under our current law, therefore, where you go next. What is clear is that the people through the Republic will have a right to forfeiture. Where you file that case, who files it is the bigger question. Because if you look at the history, the background of graft investigations in the country, usually our authorities stop at the criminal aspect. Hindi natin usually tinutulak dun sa civil aspect or the forfeiture aspect. So just broadly outlining it, there's an action under 1379, what we call the Forfeiture Act. If the government decides to pursue that, that will be filed with the Sandigan Bayan. But if hindi yun yung gagamitin because hindi naman malinaw, no, whether she was amassing wealth beyond her lawful income, then any civil action may have to be filed with the regular courts, and it won't be by the Ombudsman or the DOJ. It will be with the Solicitor General. So I'm sure, and I hope that the Ombudsman, the DOJ, and even the Solicitor General are looking closely into this. It's not. These are old laws, no, but hindi natin kasi nagagamit because we really don't go after as a system yung civil forfeiture. Hindi tayo magaling maghabol usually nung assets that have been already illegally taken. On the investigation, and the cases that will be filed against other officials, of course, Yusef Cabral was an important part of allegedly of this whole system. But hindi naman cause for despair, no? Marami namang other avenues where the government can still get the necessary evidence if the flood control issue was documented and there are available documentary evidence, as long as may witness na makapagpapatunay na totoo yung mga dokumento, na authentic yung mga dokumento na iyahain, or merong alternative na oral testimony to support those documents, then they should be fine. They wouldn't really result in the dismissal of the cases against the DPWH officials.
Oo, yun nga yung tinatanong ni Congressman Terry Redon, para malalaman kung tunay na kung nakakuha man ng listahan ng mga allocables from her office, sino magpapatunay? Yun nga yung tanong. But it's good to know that not all is lost, but matatagalan lang dun sa mga kailangan makuha. Okay, maraming salamat. Thank you so much for your time today and insights. We have Attorney Paolo Tamase, Assistant Professor at UP Diliman College of Law.
Thank you, Gretchen.